What's up, all? Thanks for coming back for another video. This week I decided to do something a little bit different. Instead of being out in the yard and seeing what's going on, mowing grass and seeing what the backyard is looking like, I decided to channel my inner grass factor and look into Ironite. Is it safe for the lawn? Is it safe for you or your family? Should you use it? Let's take a look. Alright, so to start off, I guess we should start off with what is the background of Ironite and how did it become to be so questionable today as to why you should or should not use Ironite. So many years ago, let's say pre-2006, because this is where the latest report that I found from the EPA was regarding Ironite. So let's say pre-2006, Ironite was mined, I believe, in Arizona by a different company to what is today. And it was found that the amount of arsenic and lead that were found in Ironite was extremely high. We're talking well exceeding the EPA maximum levels. So ultimately, this led to Ironite being banned in Canada, and many people had sued Ironite over the amount of arsenic and lead that were found in this product. So ultimately, what happened was, they got sued. Ironite saying, "Oh no, it's fine for you. You're okay. The amount of arsenic in there and the way it's processed, like you can ingest it and you'll be okay." I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to eat anything that has arsenic in it. Just saying. But so he, and why I say he, there was a spokesperson for Ironite back then that said it was fine, and so ultimately it led to all these lawsuits and everything against Ironite, and they end up finally selling the Ironite name to Pennington, who is a subsidiary. I believe the full owner of Pennington is like Central Garden and Pet Supply or something like that. So they purchased the Ironite name mainly for marketing or whatever, and the mine that was used for Ironite originally, where they pulled the mine tailings out of to use to create the Ironite, they moved the mine. That mine was eventually, I guess, shut down, and so they moved the mining operations elsewhere. Alright, so I'm kind of recording this over time so I can try to gather my thoughts, do a little more research before I open my mouth and say something stupid, which I tend to do fairly often. So let's fast forward with the Ironite to now. So is there still arsenic in Ironite? And the answer is yes. How much of it? According to a study, there's been two different studies, actually three of them, but one is a different formula of Ironite that I've kind of put to the side. That was the 12-10-10 formula. So there's a 2009 study of the 101 Ironite granular that shows that there's arsenic levels of 2.36 parts per million. And in 2012, another study was done, and it shows that there was arsenic levels at 4.79 parts per million. Now, what are those numbers in contrast to what, say, like the EPA's maximum limits are? The EPA, according to soil, I'm not including the water limits, which are significantly more minuscule. The maximum limits for EPA arsenic in soil is 0.39 parts per million. I'll say it again. The maximum limits for the EPA of arsenic in the soil is 0.39 parts per million. Ironite, as I just said, the 2012 study said it was 4.79 parts per million in the Ironite. Significantly more than what is already found in the soil. So Does that mean that as soon as you apply Ironite, you're already over your 0.39 parts per million in your soil? That's debatable. So it depends on what is already in your soil. Now, some of the numbers I pulled up, and it's for Ohio because a lot of the stuff that I found, apparently the Ohio EPA did a lot of studying on the arsenic in soil, and the original report where I found the levels of Ironite to be extremely high levels of arsenic was the Cincinnati EPA that did the report. So a lot of it is tied to Ohio soils and the reports that the Ohio EPA had done. I guess more specifically the Cincinnati branch. So in Ohio, there were 492 soil samples that were taken over 116,000 square kilometer area, and it is either from both soil levels or just one of them at a 15 to 30 centimeters and or a 30 to 60 centimeter soil sample. And they found that our arsenic levels here in Ohio are already between 2 and 45.6 parts per million. 2 and 45.6 parts per million. And most of the samples that were taken were 10 parts per million or more. 0.39 parts per million max limits. 10 parts per million or more already in the soil. That kind of scares me a little bit, just saying. Already in Ohio, our arsenic levels are 10 parts per million or more when the EPA says that 0.39 parts per million is what is the max limits. Ouch. And so then for me to essentially go through and put Ironite down that potentially already has another 4.79 parts per million, spreading that across the lawn, those arsenic levels are in my opinion, going to go through the roof, especially in my area if I'm at that higher end of the 45 point, I got it written down here, that's why I keep looking at my screen over here, 4.79 parts per million. So if I'm at if I'm at 45.6 parts per million and I add another 4.79 parts per million, I'm at potentially 50 parts per million. That's huge. So can all the arsenic be removed from Ironite? No. It's a natural occurrence that is around iron, and it's even found in gold. So arsenic is a natural element that is kind of tied to iron. And you get two different things out of the arsenic here, especially tied to Ironite. And I've been flipping through. I've had like 5 or 6 different tabs open in a window trying to read. I'm kind of tumbling down the rabbit hole as to, okay, this bonds with this, it creates this, which breaks down to this, releases this, and this one, when acted with this, bonds to this, and so it's just going crazy. So I'm trying to keep up and trying to wrap my brain around all of it. My head's kind of exploding as I'm reading through some of this. But essentially, you have 2 main bonds that happen in Ironite. The first one, and it seems to be more prominent, is oxygen and arsenic bonding to create what is called scorodite. And scorodite will eventually weather down into what is called limonite, which is one of 3 principal iron ores. So that's your main iron source, I believe, is how that works. So arsenic and oxygen create scorodite. Scorodite weathers down to limonite, and essentially gives you your iron core. Now the other bonding is arsenic and sulfur. That creates a arsenopyrite. And so you have the sulfur and arsenic bond, and which sulfur is good if you have a fairly alkaline soil. You want that sulfur in there to lower your pH. So that's potentially good, right? Um, but however, this arsenopyrite is going to break down, and you can get a iron arsenate out of it, and this stuff can be kind of nasty. All right, so going back to the arsenopyrite. So I'm really going to be kind of hammering down in this area. I think this is where the ironite can potentially be dangerous due to this specific element. The arsenopyrite, if it is, obviously, if you swallow it or whatever, it's probably not good for you. But if it is heated, unfortunately, I don't see anything as far as like how heated. If we're talking like Kelvin or if we're talking like 200 degrees or something. But in either case, if it is heated, it could produce a poisonous sulfur and arsenic gas that is potentially fatal if you inhale large quantities of it. So that is kind of a red flag there with arsenopyrite. Now, with it breaking down into iron arsenate, so there's this ECHA Europe, so I guess it's a European equivalent of like maybe like the EPA or something, I guess. So when I was trying to find more info on iron arsenate, they have a hazard classification and labeling with anything with the iron arsenate, and right on it it says danger. According to the classification provided by companies to ECHA and CLP notifications, this substance is toxic if swallowed, is toxic if inhaled, may cause cancer, is very toxic to aquatic life, and is very toxic to aquatic life with long-lasting effects. Alright, so another reference is according to the iron arsenate. I guess also it has another name as ferric arsenate. According to the National, I've never heard of these guys, I got to go back down here and look at it. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a legit government organization, so we're not looking at Europe here, we're looking back in the United States, and their classification for this is DOT hazard label is poison. Insoluble in water, is toxic by ingestion and inhalation, and is a strong irritant. It is used in the manufacture of insecticides. Fire hazard, non-combustible, substance itself does not burn but may decompose upon heating to produce corrosive and or toxic fumes. Containers may explode when heated. Runoff may pollute waterways. Highly toxic, may be fatal inhaled, swallowed, absorbed through skin. Avoid any skin contact. Effects of contact or inhalation may be delayed. Fire may produce irritating, corrosive, and or toxic gases. Runoff from fire control or dilution water may be corrosive and or toxic and cause pollution. So another thing I found on the iron arsenate, or sometimes it's got apparently a few different names. Another one is arsenate of iron. So I found something when trying to do research on the actual iron arsenates and find out exactly what all is used for it. I did mention that it was used as an insecticide. I did find something kind of interesting. This dates all the way back to World War II. There is a page I found called the Journal of Economic Entomology. I was talking about the arsenate of iron. So with this, basically this document was saying that they were looking for iron arsenate or some sort of arsenic to use for insecticides and worry about shortages, because a lot of the arsenic that the United States got came from, I believe, Japan and Sweden. And so they were looking for another way to get arsenic for insecticides, and not only for the insecticides, but they were looking for the arsenic so they can use it in lewisite and other war gases. So at this point, they're looking at this arsenic to mine for war gases. So keep in mind, this is documented of October 1943, so this was during World War II, and the Nazis were using a lot of the nasty gases. So at this point, it looks like the United States was looking for arsenic to be able to create, or potentially create, their own war gases. And one of the main mines that they found that had the largest amount of arsenic was in Utah at the time, which I believe Arizona, Utah was pretty high up there with the amount of arsenic, and that's where Ironite was originally mining, was in Arizona. So pretty close there where the United States was mining arsenic to create insecticides and potentially create their own chemical warfare. So that's iron arsenate. Insecticides and potentially used for chemical warfare. Alright, so I guess I've tumbled down the rabbit hole far enough to determine that the chemicals and everything within Ironite aren't necessarily great for most of us. At least in my particular application, it would not be very beneficial. I have high amounts of arsenic already, plus I would be adding more arsenic. And with me having a fairly clay soil, I don't think that's going to go very well. So for some of us who still want to add that additional iron into our lawns to try to get a little bit of greener lawn, what other alternatives do we have? A little bit of searching around, I found another product that is called Dr. Iron. I personally never heard of it until about 2 seconds ago, right before I started recording. But it looks like it is a product sold by Monterey Lawn and Garden that is 22% iron as opposed to Ironite's 20%, and it is 55% sulfur. So for some of us who have a little bit higher pH, I am fairly pH neutral where I'm at, so I typically stay right around 7. And in my backyard where I just put down a bunch of topsoil, I took a pH meter to it, and it's sitting at about 8 right now. So that's not very good. So in order for me to remedy that, I could put down something that has sulfur in it because it's a little more acidic. I can drop my pH down. I would ideally like to get it down to about like 6.3, 6.5. But this Dr. Iron would allow me to do that. So I'd be adding iron as well as sulfur to my lawn so I could get a little bit greener lawn. Plus I can get the sulfur to drop my pH down. And from what I'm reading, it's kind of a basic article about iron chlorosis in Utah. So maybe Connor might know something about the iron chlorosis if he happens to see this. But basically this article, this is a desertnews.com article, and they're basically talking about the iron chlorosis issues they have in Utah with having a more alkaline soil. So according to this article, it looks like there's 2 different things that these guys in Utah will use. So this turf fertilizer that this guy by the name of Ken Holt, he is a product manager, I believe it said, product manager for Intermountain Farmers Association. Okay, so he was asked about the iron chlorosis, and this is relating to Utah. So again, the pH there is between 7.4 and 8.4. My soil is around 7, so I'm fairly neutral, but I would like to drop it down. And they talk about various things to try. You're looking at iron citrates versus iron sulfates. The iron citrates do not stain concrete versus an iron sulfate will permanently stain. So the Dr. Iron being iron sulfates, that will probably stain. And actually, a correction on that. On the front of the bag of Dr. Iron, big letters on it, it says that it's non-staining, so maybe it won't stain the concrete. But if you can find something like this iron citrates, the name was mentioned by Baycore LC, as based out of, I guess, Logan, Utah. It specializes in fertilizers for home and garden markets that are formulated for local soil conditions. Whether or not that would work elsewhere if you're able to get a hold of it and have it shipped. But that could be a potential alternative. And the other things are mentioned as far as like, you know, your chelated irons, but some of that can get fairly expensive, especially depending on the chelating agent that is being used. I guess this referred to as the Cadillac of chelating agents is EDDHA, which is derived from sodium ferric ethyl. Oh, geez, I'm going to hurt myself saying this. Ethylenamine. So this is an imported product produced by pharmaceutical industry and is very expensive. So it sounds like you might want to find an alternative instead of trying to use a chelating agent that has the EDDHA in it. So it'll be a little bit cheaper. And again, this stuff I'm trying to research, see if there is an alternative to Ironite, so we can get away from using something that is potentially, you know, harmful. Alright, so the way this Dr. Iron works, and I've been kind of verifying this with Matt Martin as I've been doing my research, is the Dr. Iron is a 22% iron and 55% sulfur. The way they do this is you have your iron oxide instead of another like iron sulfate, where it's going to release your scoridites as well as the arsenopyrites. And so you're going to have an iron oxide, and then it is coated with a sulfur. Matt said that this is kind of the way some sulfur coated urea works for other fertilizers. So the benefit of that is you're going to release the sulfur into your soil, which will then acidify your soil, and then because your soil becomes a little bit more acidic, that will typically allow the plants to be able to get the iron. It's a little bit more readily available. If you have a soil that is a little more alkaline, then the iron isn't always readily available for the plants to absorb. So there could be tons of iron in the soil, but if the pH is too, I guess I would say too high, so if your pH is around 7.5, 8, it won't be able to readily absorb that iron. So, and by putting the sulfur in first and letting that dissolve in, acidify the soil, and then break down the iron, that iron will then become more readily available to the plant. Alright, I think that's going to do it for this video. I think I've tumbled down the rabbit hole far enough to come to my conclusion that I feel that Ironite is still not quite safe. Is there arsenic in Ironite still? Yes. It's naturally occurring, so it will probably never get fully removed from Ironite, so it is going to be there. So I don't want to just leave it at that and say, okay, Ironite's bad, stay away from it, and then there not be any alternatives. So it looks like Dr. Iron, for what I can tell, is going to be the next best solution. I don't see anything tying it to being potentially harmful. There were some questions about iron oxide toxicity, but I haven't quite found anything on that yet. So that I will do a little more research on, and by all means, you know, anyone who sees this, I encourage you to, you know, double check and research this as well. So all of the links that I have found, I've saved all of them. I will put all of the links down below in the description, so that way anything that I'm saying off with the numbers and who said this and said this is what we use and soil numbers are this, all the links are down, so that way you have all the references that I used. So I definitely don't want to, you know, come across saying, well, this is this and this is that, and not have any actual references to back it up. When you do research, you need to have some sort of references to prove what you say, right? So I think that'll do it for this week. Hopefully that helps and might draw at least some sort of conclusion as to Ironite, whether or not you should or should not use it. But as always, like, comment, subscribe, hit me up, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.